Hello everyone, this is Eric, the Asian movie enthusiast, and this is part 2 of our exploration of Asian horror films released during 2008. We're going to finish off the less impressive titles and then crack into some of the ones that I think are watchable or maybe even pretty good. Now our first film tonight is going to have another familiar title to you, and that is Shake, Rattle, and Roll 10, a Filipino horror anthology. Now again, the title to this movie should be very familiar to you at this point because, we've already covered every single one of the installments that predate this one. The vast majority of them were pretty bad, and you may be surprised that Shake, Rattle, and Roll 10 did not make an appearance in my last video, which covered the worst films from this particular year, in my opinion. This one is not quite as bad as some of the others, but that doesn't mean it's good, and it isn't. This is, of course, an anthology of 3 short horror films. So in Emergency, ghoulish creatures attack a remote hospital. The full moon looms high one windy night. 2 young men are traveling along a dark highway when they accidentally run over a pregnant woman crossing the street. They see that she is having a miscarriage, so they immediately carry her to the hospital. But the mysterious woman was not the only patient that night. So there's a lot of running around in an attempt to avoid the monsters here, which are like demonic humanoids of some kind. There is one pretty good scene in a kitchen. Okay, I'll give it that much, but most everything else is pretty run-of-the-mill in this one. Not terrible or anything, but it feels like a B-grade flick that's lacking in memorable scenes. The second short story here, Class Picture, opens with a terrified young woman running through the halls of a college at night. She sees terrifying things and is scourged by an unseen force, while a diabolical female laughter is heard, kind of like a disembodied laughter. The young woman dies after being stoned and having her forehead sliced by a razor being held by an unknown female hand, later revealed to be that of Sister Maria Bologna, the evil nun teacher who haunts the school in return for a terrible oath done in the past. So, there's a fear of scalping by the characters that is presented in this one, and it is a bit more mean-spirited than previous entries in this franchise. That is kind of a welcome change here. Not a lot of the previous horror films in this franchise were mean-spirited. Had some violent or graphic violence at all. This one has a little bit of that. It's got a little bit of an edge to it, so I like that. It does have, unfortunately, though, some stupid moments and very bad acting at times to endure. Story overall is just kind of mediocre. So you have like the violent, evil nun ghost or spirit, which is a big plus, but then everything else just kind of, it just kind of falls apart. It's just not, I can't give it a pass grade just because overall it's just not a very good flick. So the third short story, Neves. A local hero must save her hometown from rampaging nature spirits known as Encanto. I looked up the Encanto, and the mythology seems to have a variety of different forms and variations, but these Encanto apparently have some similarities to human beings. I can't remember if it was that they actually can get hurt similar to a human being, something like that. My big problems with this particular short film is that the pacing really drags in this one, and the comedy I don't think really worked too well. Spirits look kind of like tall elves, which is kind of lame in the way that they're presented. I kind of wish the monster design was handled a little bit better as well. So, yeah, I didn't really like this one either. I mean, overall, I cannot recommend Shake, Rattle, and Roll 10. For a variety of reasons, which I already covered, but the runtime also seems too long in this one, which is kind of odd for an anthology, because an anthology automatically kind of shifts pace and mixes things up, which usually helps in pacing, but this is 140 minutes long. For 3 short films, just seemed kind of excessive, so it definitely hurt the pacing overall. And this is even worse considering that the script writing and the dramatic elements are weak in all of them. So, a few of them have some, I guess, pretty good horror elements or themes presented, but just the overall quality is really lacking. I have not seen any of the films in this franchise that were released after Shake, Rattle, and Roll 10. I can't remember how many there were. They might be up to Shake, Rattle, and Roll like 15 or 16 or something, but I stopped at 10, and I can't see myself reigniting my interest in these. So this may be the last exposure that you have regarding this series of films. A very disappointing series of films overall. And I say good riddance. Good riddance. Let's move on here. Oh, actually, someone recommended that I just give a very brief availability summary, even for the films that I don't like, which I think kind of makes sense. Because previously I've only given DVD availability info on films that I do like, but I can see just in case you're interested. So Shake, Rattle, and Roll 10, which I do not recommend, is difficult to find. So pretty easy choice not to see that one. So our next one here is from Japan, and it is called Beginning of Toire no Hanako-san. This is kind of a horror drama hybrid. So this film concerns Hanako-san herself as a human teenager who is bullied by her classmates. After being transferred to a junior high school, Hanako is bullied by these three peers, and if that weren't bad enough, everybody discovers that she was the sole survivor of a family massacre case. So afterward, one of the bullies goes missing, and Hanako is suspected of being the criminal. Obviously, a lot of things happen around this girl. People become suspicious. But that's not that's only the beginning of the mysterious events that occur on school grounds. Now, we previously covered 2 films, I believe, about Hanako-san, the Hanako-san legend, one from 1995 and the other from 1998, both of which were quite good. But this one in particular that we're covering tonight is a bland and uneventful origin story. There's no atmosphere to be found in terms of visuals or score. It has very low production values too, and the visuals are blandly shot. In addition, the pacing is painfully lethargic, and the acting is very stiff. So all of these things make this movie very difficult to sit through. It's hard to sit through this one. The horror scenes basically, they use this little gimmick where they transport the victims into kind of like an alternate tragic version of their own life, which does have some potential if you think about it, but none of that potential is actually tapped by the filmmakers here. The ghost scenes are low grade, ineffective at provoking scares. Kind of an interesting attempt in terms of the alternate reality type nuance that they throw into this, but it's too lackluster to have any impact. Now, this movie is only 68 minutes long, but it's not worth sitting through it. So, Beginning of Toire no Hanako-san is just, I can't recommend this one either. There are definitely much better Hanako-san films out there for you to watch. And the availability of this one is, well, it is available on YouTube, but without subtitles. So, now our next film here does have its fair share of fans, but I personally thought that this was painfully incompetent. And that is Death Bell, also known as Goza, also known as Bloody Midterms, because, as we've seen before, every South Korean horror film should have 3 titles. So set within a high school, a class of students are forced to answer riddles in an effort to save their abducted friends. So this is basically about a group of, I think, 20 or so students who partake in an elite class to prepare for their college entrance exams. After several strange incidents, the class is interrupted by a TV showing of a top-ranking student being trapped in a glass case that is slowly being filled with water. A voice over the PA system announces that questions will be posed to the class. Failure to answer them in time will lead to the student's death, and it also warns them against leaving the school. So that's the premise, and I have to say, the presentation of this movie is obnoxious right from the start. It begins with a horror scene involving onryo ghosts, excessive shaky cam, and flash editing. So, for example, another scene as an example is that there's a 30-second montage of some students going out to a dance club, And I kid you not, there are at least 3 edits for every second during the sequence. It's headache-inducing stuff. The entire film is shot like it's targeted towards viewers with 1-second attention spans. Also, scenes just kind of jump around in seemingly haphazard, schizophrenic, random ways. Everything feels very incomplete and pointless, if that makes any sense. It's one of the most incompetently edited South Korean films of the last decade, especially during like the opening half hour. It just jumps around. You're just like, man, the scenes don't even feel complete. Like things were carved out in the editing process. Yeah, I did not like it. The violence is occasionally bloody, which is of course nice for horror fans, but scare tactics are not memorable, and for the most part, it feels lazy in how it's constructed and filmed. You know, the problem is that both the torture and the ghost scenes are very mediocre, and there is not one impressive nor creative murder to behold in the entire film. And that's a problem with a film that operates similar to a slasher. But, you know, again, sometimes the violence does kind of get a notch up, and it becomes, you know, I don't know, it doesn't really have the impact that it probably should. Now, I did mention an Onryo ghost earlier, so you may be wondering if there was a ghost behind all of this. Like, right from the opening scene, you see Onryo ghosts. And then you're, like, wondering, wait, I thought this was, like, a slasher or something, so why are there ghost scenes in this? And then the first ghost scene occurs during a dream, and it's just, like, it's like, what's the point of a scene like this in a slasher movie? A ghost scene in the middle of a dream in a slasher flick. I don't know. You'd expect the ending to give more clarification, but when it comes, you just kind of throw your hands in the air because it's just so stupid and incompetently written. And why does everyone split up? You know, I know that you have to have a suspension of disbelief in these movies, especially slasher-style films. You know, you're going to have to give some leeway to some dumb character decision-making just to keep the film going. But why does everybody split up right after the murders start in this school? I mean, you have a killer on the loose, and the students split up and then spend the night there. I know the killer told them not to leave, but I'd rather take my chances attempting to escape than spend the night at a school with a murderer running around. I mean, it's just... Maybe it would have been better if it was executed in a more fluid, natural way. There's a Japanese film we're going to cover from 2012 that has kind of not a similar premise, but a bunch of students trapped in a school with a murderer going around, and that one is far more convincing in how it's executed. This one's just, you just shake your head. It's just dumb. Not a whole lot of positives I can say, really, about Death Bell, personally. The lead actor is Beom-soo, I think. And he's good as usual. He's perhaps most recognizable from his roles in The City of Violence and History of a Salaryman. So that was nice to see him here. He's good as always. There are also some nice flashes of style here and there and in short pockets of time. But the overall quality, as I've said, is just not good. It's not as good as your typical South Korean horror film, that's for sure. So overall, I would have to say that this movie actually kind of reminded me of Say Yes, that terrible South Korean thriller horror flick that we covered back in 2001, just because of its boundless stupidity and obnoxiousness. So yeah, I'm not a fan of this one at all. Now, Death Bell is moderately available in Region 2 and Region 3 formats with English subtitles. And we will cover the sequel in a later video, so we'll see if the sequel can get any better or improve upon the flaws of the original. Alright, so our next film here is another anthology, and it's from Indonesia this time. And it is called Takut, Faces of Fear. So this is a mostly unimpressive set of 6 Indonesian short films that are, at best, a mixed bag. Now, I know that some people seem to enjoy this one, but, you know, that's 2 movies in a row that have decent reputations online that I just did not like. But it is what it is, you know. In my opinion, this one lacks the filmmaking quality or pure entertainment value to stand with the better Asian horror anthologies out there. And since there are 6 of these short films, I'm going to very briefly discuss them. So the first film is called Show Unit. It's about a romantic couple who plan to marry in the near future. While attending a party across the street, the guy sees the lights in his house flickering as he's at his neighbor's house at a party. So he decides to go home and confront the burglars. So this is kind of hokey and mediocre despite a good premise involving the cover-up of a murder. The execution of the pivotal opening scene is very stupid and unnatural. The way it goes down just doesn't feel like it would happen in real life. I don't know. And the whole film bases itself on this scene, so it doesn't work. Second short film, Titisan Naya, is about a woman with an urban mindset who visits her hometown outside the city. But her disrespect for tradition causes some problems from beyond the grave. So in a nutshell, this is simply very kind of run-of-the-mill, commonplace story about spiritualism. And, you know, if you disrespect your spiritualistic roots, bad things might happen to you. The next short film here, the third one, is called Peeper. It is a story about a peeping Tom, of course, who gets his comeuppance. Now, from what I remember, this guy likes peeping on girls, but gets into trouble when he attends a cultural dance of some kind. Now, the lead actor here actually played one of the lower-level gangsters in The Raid 2, so you might notice him. I like what they were thinking with this one in terms of how the general premise and how they were setting things up, but it relies heavily on a very short climax ending that is rather disappointing. It doesn't do a bad job of setting things up, but in terms of giving it impact at the end, it doesn't work too well. The fourth short film is called The List, and it's a comedy mostly, with some horror elements, about a girl who hires a witch doctor to exact revenge on her ex-boyfriend. Now, this story was actually pretty good. I kind of like this one. It relies heavily on humor, and in this case, it works pretty well. I giggled and found it somewhat amusing. I'm sure, you know, any of the girls out there who may have just broken up with their boyfriends may want to check this one out. You know, it'll put you in a good mood. So I liked The List. That's the first short film in this anthology that I think was pretty good. Now the next one, the fifth short film, is The Rescue. It's set in a zombie-infected Jakarta, with a rescue team attempting to get one building to the next. You know, they're in one building, they have to get to the next building. I think there's like a helicopter rescue unit coming or something, and they got to get to that building in particular. It is pretty fast-paced, but it makes the mistake of trying to be dramatic at times with wafer-thin characters. That's a problem. It also really fails to give us anything memorable or impressive in terms of the zombie attacks or kills. It just feels kind of like lethargic with the zombies. You know, just like, oh, we'll chuck some zombies in, we'll have some basic attacks, and that'll be it. You know what I mean? There's nothing that you're going to remember after watching this. So, didn't really like The Rescue. Now, the final film here is probably the most well-known of this anthology, and that is called Dara, which is a gory flick involving a man who is captured and tortured by a sadistic woman. So the lead actress in this is actually very good, and the violence is actually non-stop. It's a pretty relentless, I guess, cornucopia of uncomfortable scenarios, torture, and violence. Probably the strongest entry in this anthology, so I did like it, along with the comedy short The List. But Dara was directed by the Mo brothers, who I do not believe are actual brothers biologically. But since their first names are Kimo and Timo, they're known as the Mo brothers, because both their first names end in Mo. I'm a pretty big fan of these guys, and they're actually two of the most popular directors in their home country nowadays. Now, Dara was their low-budget attempt at, you know, gritty horror, and they have subsequently given us some highly entertaining and stylish films that are also very violent. In 2009, they actually made a feature-length version of this short film, Dara, using a mostly different cast, but thankfully the same lead actress. And that was even better than this one. So I look forward to covering that film, known as Macabre, when we reach 2009. So this short film, Dara, In Takut Faces of Fear, is probably the best one of all the shorts within it. It's got some good violence, pretty basic stuff, but it works. So, Takut Faces of Fear, does have its moments. It's a little bit difficult to officially recommend it because 4 out of the 6 segments were rather disappointing. And one of the better segments is surpassed by its feature-length version, which you could probably watch anyways, or in place of it. But you could do worse. You could do worse. Now, Takut Faces of Fear is available on YouTube with subtitles. So that's out there for you. Alright, so now we come to the first film that I am officially recommending, even though it's really not that good. And that is Kuntilanak 3, from Indonesia again. Hitting a few Indonesian flicks tonight. So a group of youngsters are on a mission to Ujung Sedo to find their missing friends in a haunting jungle. Along the way, they meet Samantha, our protagonist from the previous films, who is on a personal mission to a mystical village. Together, they go into the dark woods, a deafening fog, and a deadly cave where vicious ghosts come after them. Every event is connected to Samantha, who has a wicked curse to summon a she-devil called Kuntilanak. The old witch who lives in the village may be the only one who can stop her curse. So Rizal Mantovani returns to the director's chair here, but there is a certain cheapness to the filmmaking this time, which is present during a few of the horror scenes themselves. There are a few cheap jump scares in this one that kind of got on my nerves. Julia Stella is also relegated to a supporting role in this one. In Kuntilanak, she was really the lead character. In Kuntilanak 2, she is also the lead character, but maybe slightly more supporting. And then in Kuntilanak 3, she's a straight-up supporting character. She's present throughout the whole film, but it doesn't really focus on her as much as the previous installments. What am I got here? The plot does become a bit more interesting, though, okay, later on, and supplies some cool horror scenes that I enjoyed. Some of the environments are quite atmospheric, too, which is good. The entire film takes place in a dimly lit forest, which provides, a nice mood throughout. The ghosts are plentiful and seem more sadistic and crazy in this one, with quite a few spooky laughs that come from them, which is kind of freaky. I don't remember them laughing as much in the first 2 Kuntilanak films, so they added kind of a sadistic laugh, and that kind of creeped me out a little bit. That was pretty cool. I think it's kind of debatable whether Kuntilanak 3 is better than Kuntilanak 2, but one thing is for sure, the original film is the best one and the one to start out with. Start out with Kuntilanak. If you like it, check out the sequels. Now, Kuntilanak 3 is available on YouTube, but without subtitles. Alright, so our next 2 films here were Blind Buys when I was visiting Japan on vacation. Alright, so they're both Japanese films. And they are called the Uniform Servy Girl films. There's 2 of them. Now, Uniform Servy Girl, I think is short for Uniform Survival Girl. So a group of schoolgirls, who else, travel to a desolate forest resort to play laser tag. Well, there's something a little different. But the games are interrupted by zombies. That is not something different. So this movie begins with these girls arriving in an old school village that has traditional Japanese architecture. Some of the people there are walking around in samurai garb and kimonos. Our protagonists get fitted with some laser tag equipment, break out their laser guns, and get ready for some action. But that's when the zombies break out. So before I continue with my review, I actually would like to tell you my own little laser tag story. So back when I was in, I think it was the first year in college, me and 3 of my friends entered a laser tag tournament at a local. We have like it's called Lasertron around the corner from my house, and they had like this big tournament. It's really the only one they ever had, and they advertised, and people were coming from different states and stuff. It was pretty crazy. And long story short, we won the tournament, and we had no idea what like the grand prize was going to be. It's just like it's a laser tag tournament. It's right around the corner from my house. So like, what type of a prize could this possibly be? And the grand prize was an all-expense-paid trip to Florida for a week to like Disney World. Is Disney World in Florida or Disney? Yeah, Disney World is in Florida. Disneyland, I think, is in California. So me and a few of my friends got like all of our tickets to all, Universal Studios and Animal Kingdom and, all those places for free. Got the plane flight paid for us, a whole bunch of stuff. It was crazy. I couldn't believe that they would give a grand prize like that out just for winning a laser tag contest. But in our prime, back in college, we were tough to beat, man. We were tough to beat. So back to the movie. There is some shoddy CGI in a uniformed Survey Girl and very little gore. But the zombies are fairly unique with plants wrapped around their body parts. They're like some kind of undead plant-human hybrid or something like that. I don't think it's ever really explained, but it's pretty cool. It's a little bit different of a zombie design. I appreciated that. Pacing is pretty good. There's lots of cheesy scuffles between the cuties and the undead, and the forest environment is effective. There's also a few pretty good shots of bloody skeletons after the zombies are killed, which I liked. I mean, most viewers, in my opinion, probably won't like this movie, mostly because it has very low production values, and it's kind of cheesy overall. It's never scary. But I do think it's more amusing than your average low-budget Japanese zombie flick. An ironic result considering the absence of bloody violence that typifies this subgenre. Now, I did not watch this with English subtitles. I've never been able to find it with subtitles. I just bought an unsubtitled Japanese DVD. It was like discounted, that's why I got it. So the availability of this one, tough to find. I was not able to find it when I Google searched it. But, not really one that you have to worry about seeking out, I don't think. Alright, our last two films tonight are from two more countries. We're country hopping again. Oh, wait, I forgot to cover Uniform Survey Girl 2. I almost forgot. There's probably a reason why I forgot to cover it, because it stinks. So very quickly. So the second part of this, and it was actually in a 2-disc box set when I bought it, so I got both of them. So after surviving the plant-human zombie attack, one of the girls returns to the forest with her boyfriend for no good reason. I never really understood why they returned to this place. They had the zombie outbreak. I don't know. Too much useless filler material in this one. That shows the couple sitting around a bedroom while they slowly, and I mean slowly, show signs of zombie infection. At least 40 minutes are wasted in this way. In like a 68-minute movie or something like that. It's like 60, 70 minutes long. So the first film, Uniform Survey Girl, was kind of laughably entertaining and cheesy. This one takes itself way too seriously and feels like a corny teen melodrama with a few badly executed horror scenes mixed in. Not good at all. Very boring. Not recommended. Alright. So our next film tonight is from Thailand, and that is called The Spiritual World. Ming is a troubled young woman who has been able to see ghosts and contact the dead ever since she was a little girl. It's been 15 years since she managed to escape from a mysterious ghost that kept following her. So one day she meets a young doctor named Bud, who visits her with a purpose. Now, Bud knows that Ming can contact the dead, so he wants her to find the reason behind the death of his father. Now, while his father's death was recorded by the police as a suicide, he believes that it was murder. So the appearance of Bud brings back memories of the past, and now Ming must face a truth that is even more terrible. Now she's being stalked by that same lost soul who is far more dangerous than any ghost she has met so far. So to start, character development and acting here is run-of-the-mill. It's limited to kind of like popcorn horror fare type depth. However, the most impressive aspect of this film is the mood, which is effectively dark with stylish visuals, intense scoring, and some nicely colorful lighting. So the overall style of this film I really liked. Jump scares are also minimized, by the way. Even though this is a film from Thailand, the ghosts themselves have kind of an Indonesian flavor to them, with the white eyes and the wide mouths, as well as the demonic violent nature, so I like that. Spiced it up a little bit. Also, I did like the lead actress, not a great performance by any means, but, she seemed to carry things quite well. So, in a nutshell, Spiritual World has, fairly generic premise, if you didn't notice that, but I do think that it's watchable. It's a pretty good flick. Now, Spiritual World is moderately available. I have seen actually an all-region DVD floating around on websites like Yes Asia. It's kind of a rarity for some of these Asian films to have all-region DVDs floating around, but this one still does. Alright, so our next film and last film of the evening is from Malaysia. We don't cover that many films from Malaysia. This is one, and it's a pretty good one. Probably the best overall film that we're covering tonight, I think. And that is called Hysteria. So 6 spoiled girls pull a prank that is not appreciated by the faculty at their school. They basically chant some supernatural spells and, thinking that it was just a big joke, making fun of the local witch doctor. But as punishment, the girls have to stay in school over the weekend and clean it up. Now, what they don't know is that when they set up their prank, they accidentally awakened an evil demon with a hunger for blood. Well, that's not good. Mysterious and terrifying events are then experienced by all of them. So this is essentially a demonic slasher here, right? With some decent death scenes and bloody corpses. So that, it's an upgrade there for you. The acting is actually surprisingly good here. I was kind of surprised how good the acting was. Really benefits our protagonists. These girls they're mischievous, but still likable. You don't see that very often. In a lot of American horror films, the characters like this they would become obnoxious fairly quickly. But Hysteria avoids that pitfall, which is nice. I very much appreciate that. The surrounding environments are nice. I've been saying that a lot tonight, but it's true. There is some flash editing used in this one. I'm usually not a fan of that, but it's only used a little bit, and it seems to be acceptable because it shows up within the psychic visions. They don't use it much at all in the real world moments during the film. So that, they limited it. It's dreamlike or whatever, nightmarish, so I accept it. It's okay. Now, one unfortunate aspect that I did not like about this is that genre cliches are peppered throughout the second half of this film. But as a simplistic kill fest, this movie is certainly entertaining enough for reviewing. I liked it. Now, Hysteria here. Let's take a look at the availability. It is available on YouTube, but without subtitles. So that's part 2 of our journey through Asian horror films from 2008. And be sure to join me for part 3 when we will continue to explore some of the more interesting titles from this year. It'll get more interesting now and fruitful for you. So as always, we'll see you next time.